Join us now to talk about the U.S.-China relationship, Deputy Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo. Mr. Secretary, it's good to see you.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
We should never be surprised at things we're not expecting, but 3% GDP for the near future, 5 years for China, was not something that I thought, I don't know, we get used to that nation accounting for 35% of global growth, and we can't count on that anymore.
Yeah, they have a bunch of headwinds in Chinese economy, but as you know well, Joe, they also have a bunch of resources. The thing we should be worried about is the long-term structural challenges China has. Bad demographics, high debt. Ultimately, the challenges that China has, they can solve, but it requires them to put in place reforms we've been calling on them to make for decades.
No one thinks that President Xi is in any way threatened by what's happening, but is he the right guy? He's not as powerful as he used to be. One of the lead stories in the Journal today is that his consolidation of power means he's not allowing stimulus. I've always pointed out that his backtracking on a lot of the private sector modernization that we had seen in China, we've seen that, and that's partially responsible for some of the problems.
I think you're right. When you think about it, one of the things the Chinese haven't done is open up to the private sector. And Secretary Raimondo and Secretary Yang were there and made the point that opening up to businesses would be good for China because it would create competition in their economy, and not just American businesses, but European businesses and businesses around the world. As you all know, Chinese businesses are able to do business here, sell things to American consumers. We want American businesses to be able to do the same in China on a level playing field. And China doing this isn't only good for our businesses and our workers, it's also good for China.
We know that China probably wished that the recent trip by the Treasury, by the Commerce Secretary, would have ended in a relaxation of some of these new rules and that didn't happen. She didn't backtrack. There's a lot of hawks that don't want her to, but we're partially responsible for China's slowdown, aren't we, in the way we're treating it? No?
No, I don't think we're responsible for China's slowdown. We've really targeted a narrow set of things when it comes to China that affect our national security. China's responsible for China's slowdown. They made a set of policy decisions coming out of COVID that were very different than the decisions we made. We invested in our people. We made targeted investments in our infrastructure. China did the opposite, and now you're seeing the repercussions in terms of their economic challenges.
Can I just ask, here you are telling folks, I think, China should open up and American businesses should try to go there if, in fact, they were to open up. At the same time that we're basically saying we're closing down to them in many, many ways.
Preemptively, because they're going to take Taiwan and all these other
So I don't really understand. I sort of don't understand the messaging, which is, to me, either right. I mean, I hate to say there's no nuance in it, but either we have a view that there's a real problem in China and we shouldn't be doing business with these folks, or not.
So I think you're right that the key is the nuance. And what we've said is that we are targeting a narrow set of things in China that we're not allowing them to get from the United States. But fundamentally, Chinese businesses are able to do business here in the United States, to be able to sell things in America. We want to make sure that American companies are able to do the same thing on a level playing field, and the same with our allies and partners in Europe.
How concerned, to the extent that China's economy is struggling or going to be challenged, how concerned are you about President Xi acting out, if you will, whether it be geopolitically around Taiwan or potentially talking about our Treasury? You know, if you want to boost the yen, I mean, if you boost the yen, if you want to boost the RMB, you know, do you end up start selling Treasuries, for example?
So China's going to do what's in China's self-interest, and ultimately I think that while they have headwinds, they also have the resources to deal with it. They have $3 trillion in reserves, and they have the ability to make investments in their economy. The question is what choices are they going to make internally, and I think they're going to be internally focused because that's where they have to deal with it.
But how concerned are you about the